In the middle of the sky of Europe, between the roar of the engines and the rain of bullets, happened a story that defies all logic. A German pilot had at his mercy his defenseless enemy, and he made an unexpected decision. This is the story of Franz Stigler and Charlie Brown, an encounter that changed the way of seeing war forever. December 1943. A group of American B-17 bombers heads to their objective in Germany. Among them is the Ye Olde Pub, piloted by Lieutenant Charlie Brown and his crew. It is their first combat mission, and soon they would discover how brutal war in the skies can be. The objective, an airplane factory in Bremen. But the Germans would not let them go without fighting. The Ye Olde Pub receives direct hits. A projectile crosses its fuselage and damages several of its engines. Charlie Brown and his crew fight to stay in the air, but soon face an even greater threat. The plane wobbled and turned toward the ground. Charlie and Pinky fainted. The plane fell in a nosedive a mile above the fields. Charlie began to wake up, realizing the danger. He grabbed the controls and pulled them back, while the plane continued to fall. Barely, Charlie and his co-pilot managed to straighten the battered plane just meters from the ground. But the danger had not yet ceased. With its fuselage in those conditions, almost defenseless, with one engine disabled and the other three seriously damaged, the Ye Olde Pub could be very easy prey for other German fighters or anti-aircraft batteries. Still far from the shelter of friendly territory, only a stroke of authentic good luck could make its surviving crew manage to get to safety. At that precise instant, Franz Stigler was on the ground, as his Messerschmitt had been hit in an earlier skirmish. But despite the damage it presented in the engine, he finally decided to take off with the objective of shooting down the battered B-17. As soon as he could, he took off in his Messerschmitt Bf-109 G6 with a .50 caliber Browning machine gun bullet embedded in the radiator, which put his plane's engine at risk of overheating. Still unaware of his pursuer's presence, Charlie Brown watches the horizon with worry. With a gesture, he signals his co-pilot Pinky to get up and head to the back of the bomber to perform a first damage assessment. The panorama the co-pilot encounters is not encouraging. Large pieces of the plane's fuselage had been literally ripped off, leaving its frame visible. Some wounded comrades were being attended by the luckier ones, but due to the low temperatures, the morphine vials were frozen, making their administration impossible. Meanwhile, the gunner of the ball turret, without a doubt the most dangerous position inside the bomber, was about to spot Stigler's Messerschmitt. The German pilot, very close to his target, quickly evaluates the situation. With the bomber's tail fixed in his sights, all that remains is to fire a powerful burst from his machine guns to destroy the B-17's rear ailerons. But just at that moment, he notices that the tail gunner's position is unmanned. Stigler, who had approached the American bomber with the intention of opening fire, upon seeing the state of the plane and its crew, reconsiders this idea, citing an unwritten code of ethics and chivalry in combat. Perhaps he recalled the words of one of his commanding officers, Gustav Rödel, during his combat period in North Africa. "If I ever see or hear of you shooting at a man in a parachute, I will shoot you myself." What happened next was, without a doubt, one of the most extraordinary and contradictory events of those that occurred during World War II. Charlie Brown couldn't believe what he had just seen. He thought he must be hallucinating due to post-traumatic stress. After the combat, he had to look again. Right then, on the right side of his cockpit, he spotted Stigler signaling from the cockpit of his Messerschmitt. Stigler kept signaling for him to land his plane at a German airfield and surrender or divert to nearby neutral Sweden. Meanwhile, Charlie Brown kept staring in astonishment at the German pilot. At that moment, co-pilot Pinky returned from his inspection and took his seat. His surprise was monumental. "What the hell?" "Looks like we've got company," Brown muttered. The B-17's crew did not understand what Stigler was trying to tell them through gestures, and so they continued. Stigler later told Brown after the incident that he was trying to get them to fly to Sweden. Given the lack of understanding between the two pilots, Stigler had no choice but to escort the bomber until they were over safe territory. Flying close to Brown's plane in a tight formation on the port wing, he managed to prevent German anti-aircraft units from attacking the American bomber. If the bomber had flown alone in those circumstances, it would have been easy prey for the German anti-aircraft battery observers. Luckily for both, no anti-aircraft battery opened fire on their position. Once beyond the reach of ground anti-aircraft defenses, Franz Stigler escorted the damaged B-17 over the coast until they reached open waters. Once there, Stigler tried again to communicate to Brown through signals to divert their course toward Swedish airspace, as this was the safest and closest point for the American bomber's crew to receive medical attention. As the bomber's crew still did not seem to understand what the German was trying to tell them, he tried to make himself understood in a more expeditious way. He flew his Messerschmitt Bf 109 over the B-17's cockpit and positioned himself on the other side of the aircraft, blocking their direction, forcing them to fly toward Sweden. Brown, unsure of Stigler's intentions at that moment, ordered his dorsal turret gunner to aim at Stigler, but not fire, as a warning. Understanding the message and assured the bomber was out of German airspace, Stigler departed with a salute. Brown managed to fly 400 kilometers across the North Sea and land his plane at the RAF base in Sing, home of the 448th Bombardment Group. In his post-flight report, he informed his officers about how a German fighter pilot had let him go. He was told not to repeat this to the rest of the unit, to avoid generating any positive sentiment about enemy pilots. Brown commented, "Someone decided that you can't be human and fly in a German cockpit." Stigler said nothing about the incident to his commanding officers, imagining that a German pilot who spared the enemy in combat risked execution. Later, Franz Stigler served as a pilot of the jet fighter Messerschmitt Me 262 in JV-44 until the end of the war. After the war, Brown returned home to West Virginia. Stigler moved to Canada in 1953 and became a successful businessman. Later, Brown decided he should try to find the unknown German pilot. After 4 years of searching in vain through Air Force records, Brown had discovered little. Later, he wrote a letter to a newsletter of the Combat Pilots Association. A few months later, he received a letter from Stigler. "I was him," it said. When they spoke on the phone, Stigler described his plane, the escort, and the salute. From 1990 to 2008, Charlie Brown and Franz Stigler became close friends and remained so until they died months apart in 2008.